At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
This episode is brought to you by FX's The Beauty Official Podcast. Join host Evan Ross Katz on the official podcast for FX's hottest new series, The Beauty, taking you behind the scenes with its amazing stars as they discuss the show's most jaw-dropping moments. Featuring Evan Peters, Anthony Ramos, Jeremy Pope, Ashton Kutcher, Rebecca Hall, Bella Hadid, Meghan Trainor, Isabella Rossellini, Jessica Alexander, and Ari Grainer. Search FX's The Beauty wherever you listen to podcasts.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Hello, this is Jay Scott, and you are listening to The Hook, the ultimate rock community podcast. Hope everyone's having a warm summer day. Looking across the weather forecast for the states, it looks to seem like it's hot everywhere. Hope everyone's having a cold beverage and enjoying the summer. I'd like to welcome in Chris Bischoff from the blog 360 Degree Sound. That's 360degreesound.com, 360degreesound.com, and at Twitter at 360 Degree Sound. Great follow, great insight, love his posts. And how you doing, Chris?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Jay. It's a pleasure.
As we begin every show, we start with the first question, the first time anyone has ever on the podcast. And that question is, what hooked you on rock and roll? Like every great song has a hook that sucks you in. Every rock fan has a moment, whether it's a song, a band, an album, a performance that sucked you in on rock and roll. What was it for you, Chris?
Well, I grew up in a house with a lot of music. My mom played piano, and she was a big Elvis and Hank Williams fan. My sister was a musician as well. She's 3 years older than me. And, AM radio was big when I was a kid. So, I heard a lot of, creepy teen death songs like Teen Angel and Seasons in the Sun, and creepy stuff like Rock On by David Essex, which is, such a great track. And, I started listening to my sister's 45s. She had like Wildfire by Michael Martin Murphey and Brandy by Looking Glass and that type of thing. And, I got into like novelty stuff. I don't know if you remember the song Shaving Cream. I may be showing my age here a little bit, but like The Streak by Ray Stevens and C.W. McCall's Convoy, about CB radio stuff. But my first real encounter with rock was Bohemian Rhapsody. That was the first rock single that I bought, like in 1975, and it was all about Bohemian Rhapsody for us. And that's why it's been cool to see this Queen revival, because Queen really kind of was my first tune. But then I went to camp the next year in 1976, the sixth grade camp. Steve Miller's Fly Like an Eagle was out that spring. So it was big that summer. And all the older kids at camp were totally rocking out to Fly Like an Eagle. So I heard the song Rockin' Me and Take the Money and Run. And I was like, oh, this is what the big kids are into. This is cool. I went home, and that was actually the first record that I actually purchased myself with my own money, was Fly Like an Eagle. The moment that really hooked me on rock was Bob Seger's Live Bullet. That is still a landmark live recording, just classic stuff. And that just truly moved me. I live in the Detroit area. I grew up here. obviously big Detroit guy, hugely popular here, and fought for years to break out of regional popularity and break it nationally. Live Bullet is just, I mean, he and his band are giving everything they have on that set, and it's recorded at Cobo Hall in Detroit here. That just sitting with that record, in anticipation of this, got my copy of Live Bullet that I bought back in '76, I think it came out, and I think I got it in '77. And I'm just looking at all the pictures in the gatefold. Bob, just like platform shoes, long hair and beard, and giving it all, man. Turn the Page is like a great example of that.
Yeah, the Turn the Page version on that album is an absolute classic.
Yeah, really, and just the way he brings in, he's like, this next song's from back in '72 also. It's about being on the road.
Yeah.
It's called Turn the Page. And then you hear the classic sax riff, and he's exhausted. You can just hear, every ounce of energy, right? He's given away in that.
Well, that energy helps elevate that song, because the studio version versus the live version, it's almost like two different songs.
Yeah, it's pretty flat.
Yeah, yeah. And the live energy really brings that song out to where it should be.
Yeah, and that was why I think the live LP format was so right for Bob, because he was a live performer. He was rocking Robert Seger and doing his thing at the Grandy Ballroom in Detroit, and just working hard and paying dues, man. And the connection to Detroit, I think, really brought it home for me, made it really personal. I think the song Kathmandu, the live version of Kathmandu, was the one as a young kid at that time that really, really hooked me. I was fortunate. We lived in Clarkston, Michigan, which is about 40 miles north of the city of Detroit. And that's where Pine Knob Music Theater is. Now it's called some corporate thing like DTE Theater or something. Back in the day, all the great artists came right to my little town. I mean, it was a nothing podunk town at that time, but all the national acts came through there, including Seeger.
Yeah, that's been mentioned before with interviews. I think of an interview with Geddy Lee talking about the circuits that were around for live music back in the 70s. Way different than it is now. Like you said, you'd play these small towns, these smaller halls throughout the states that you wouldn't even think of seeing a big band like that now. I remember Kiss. I wasn't old enough, but Kiss played my high school in the 70s. And,
really?
Yeah, it was before they blew up with the Kiss Alive album, which is another great live record recorded in Detroit. But it was, he talks about driving around in a station wagon with all the gear and everything and going to these small towns and hooking up with this band here and that band over there. And it was just a different type of scene back then. I think you're starting to get back to that a little bit now, because touring and playing live is so crucial to an artist making money that you see a lot of these live venues popping up in these smaller towns and bands playing there, because that's the only way they're making money now.
That's right.
But, going back to the live record that you mentioned, the 70s was the era for the live record. You think about you think back of all the classic live records released in the 70s. Kiss Alive, which I just mentioned, was also filmed or recorded at Cobo Hall, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
absolutely.
and we talk about the energy of live music and what it meant to the song and what it meant to the artist. You can talk about Kiss with Kiss Alive and how their studio records really didn't do them justice, similar to Bob Seger, similar to other artists. I think it was a great tool back then, because it seemed to me like just the recording process in the studios didn't have the ability to capture what bands were doing back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because most of these bands were live acts. That's where, like, a phenomenon that I recall as a young person was a band's first record, right, seemed like it's always their best.
Right.
Because there was just years of, just living it on the road and fighting between each other, and like, just years of songwriting. So you had distillation of, years and years of hard work on the first record. And then a lot of times, like the sophomore effort was usually like, okay, not quite the same, because I think these bands will really thrive. And I think most bands in general, if they're a real band, right, you want to see them live.
Right.
And hear their, see their show, feel the energy, and hear the different arrangements that they do live. So being close to Pine Knob, you got a chance to actually then see Seeger live, and hear him play with the band. And I mean, that was just transcendent. Yeah, I'm like, this is amazing. This is what I want. I want more of this. I hear people on your show, having that experience as young people, like, yes, more of this, please.
Yes. I just took my son to see the Raconteurs on.
Nice.
Was it Sunday? Yeah, it was Sunday up in Milwaukee. And I've never seen Jack White. I've been a fan of Brendan Benson for a long time. Great singer-songwriter. Oh, yeah, I love his stuff.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. First of all, it was so hot at the rave. The rave was the venue that they played at, and it's about a couple thousand, 1,500 to a couple thousand capacity. I could be wrong. There might be more. But it was so hot because it's an older building, so there's no AC. So you're watching the opening act, and you're sweating, and it kind of builds up the anticipation. And I was telling my son this after the show. It used to be when we went to a concert, that first song, those first two songs, were like a punch right to the audience, right to the gut of the audience. It was just 0 to 60 in terms of adrenaline in like 2 seconds. And It's very rare that you see a band do that now, where they come out and it's just, and I tell you what, Jack White came out completely fired up, and they just started to roll. And those first 5 or 6 songs, like, they held you at a level of energy for 5 or 6 songs in the beginning they just gripped you. And it's been a long time since I've been at a show where I felt that grip. And I've seen everybody. I saw the Winery Dogs last month. I saw Bad Company earlier this month. I saw Temperance Movement and Tyler Bryant. You name it. I Greta Van Fleet I've seen. And they all do a great job. They're all great. But, man, the Raconteurs just held you and it was just the energy of the crowd and the energy of the band. And I said to my son, I'm like, that's how it's done. That's how you play it.
Yeah, and that's Jack White, our Detroit boy.
Yeah. I mean,
and he's really carrying a torch that I think a lot of us can relate to. He's not as old as me, and probably not as old as you, but he gets it. I loved in It Might Get Loud. Did you ever see that?
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I love it.
The opening bit where he's like making a guitar out of a piece of driftwood and like a wire and like a pop bottle or something. You know what I mean? It's like just that spirit of experimentation. And if you ever come to his store in Detroit, I mean, it's super cool, man. He's just got all kinds of. It's an emporium of rock and roll wonders, and I love that there's a guy out there who's not only keeping that spirit alive, but being very successful in the process.
Absolutely. No, it's great. I'm on the fence. Speaking of Michigan, I'm on the fence about the Struts in Grand Rapids this weekend. So it's about a 3.5 hour drive for me. And I haven't seen the Struts in a couple of years. And I'm like, do I do it?
Yeah, I forget where they're playing. I think it's anyway, but that would be awesome. Grand Rapids actually has a nice little scene. Yeah, they get a lot of national acts going through. Like Stray Cats are playing there, and they're not coming to Detroit on this tour.
I'd love to see the Stray Cats. I've never seen the Stray Cats, and I'd love to see them.
Yeah, I finally went and saw Brian Setzer's Christmas thing. My wife and I went this past holiday season. It was phenomenal. He's just, and again, throwing back to Seeger, and your experience with the Raconteurs. I mean, Brian Setzer is a performer. Comes out in like a purple lame leisure suit, and he's got this glitter Les Paul or whatever. I mean, he's a showman.
Yeah,
I think we're missing that a little bit in rock today.
Well, let's segue into our discussion, because we kind of are talking about the live albums and the 70s decade and how those records, not only with the sound of the album, but also the packaging. You know, being able to see the live photo on the back of the record. Most live albums had that photo of the performance with the crowd that sucked you in, that hooked you on that record. It was like, wow, look at this. This is a complete awesome experience. And the discussion we're going to have today is that the difference between the physical and the digital platforms. Buying music digitally versus buying music physically, and where the kind of future is going with that and what's happening. It's a topic that I'm really passionate about because I love the physical aspect of the music. I still buy CDs. I still buy vinyl.
God love you.
Yeah, I love that packaging. A couple years ago, my son, when he turned 12, I bought him a CD player and about 10 CDs, and he's compiling a small collection of music as well. And I notice his connection is much more deeper than his friends who don't have that physical connection. And that's really what we want to talk about. So we've kind of gone back and forth on direct message about what digital means today and what it's doing to the music business. And it's really at the heart of it. It really starts with how you obtain music and how you absorb it. We're from a different generation. And I hate to use the term back in the day, but back in the day when a record came out, I think it was every Tuesday or
Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday. And usually if I didn't have the money, if I didn't blow it all on whatever over the weekend with my friends, I'd wait till I get paid on a Friday. And a bunch of us would get into a car and we'd head to the record store and we'd get there. We'd go eat dinner, get a burger or something like that, a pizza, and then we'd head over to the record store. We'd get there about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and we'd be there for a couple hours. I mean, just 2 hours, just thumbing through music, looking at the covers of different albums, the back cover of the record, and just absorbing that. And there were times where I bought albums just solely based on the cover of the record.
Yes. Me too.
Yeah, because I'm like, wow, this looks really cool. And yeah, sometimes it wasn't good. It did, the music didn't match what I anticipated. But a lot of times it did. A lot of times it was like, wow, this looks badass. I remember buying the Crocus Headhunter record.
Okay.
Based on the cover of the record. I just looked at it. I'm like, wow, this looks badass. I think I'm going to get this. I don't know who Crocus is, but... And then I was just like a total like lifelong fan. They're not a lot of people don't consider them a great band. I love them though. They're like one of my like bad habits, I guess.
A guilty pleasure.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I definitely had that experience too. Like, I remember, in the 80s, we were all really sort of lamenting like the state of rock. I mean, 80s was a tough decade. In retrospect, there's a lot of great stuff that came out of there, but at the time it seemed a little barren. And I remember flipping through and I found the Meat Puppets. I'd never heard of the Meat Puppets. It was like a painting of a coffee cup on the cover. And I was just like, Meat Puppets?
I think I remember that record. I remember that record.
Up on the Sun. We went home and threw it on. And all my buddies were just like, what in the world is this? This is amazing. It was just like, came completely out of nowhere because we had no idea what it was. So yeah, I mean and I think that's part of the vinyl. My vinyl experience anyway was just the really compelling nature of the album jackets and the inner sleeves and the lyrics and the details. And I'm an information guy, so like all that information was like right there.
Plus the smell. Remember the smell of a new album? When you take the plastic off and you'd be in your room and it just had like this smell, and then you'd open it up and then the lyrics would be there and then the thank you list and who produced it. And I'm like, oh yeah, this guy produced that record by this band. And it was an experience because you were absorbing it both by hearing it and then by touching it and seeing it. Where today,
the tactile component was huge, and the ritual, right, of taking it out of the jacket for the first time, and like maybe there's a little extra little bits of paper stuck to the record, and like blowing them off, right?
Right.
setting it on the turntable, dropping the needle, that, the sound, as you anticipate the start of the first track, just the lead track of a record. Sequencing was such a big deal in the vinyl days.
It was, yes, it was absolutely huge. The other,
you do a whole show on sequencing, I think.
You absolutely can. That is a lost art in music today. Now it just seems
call me back next week. We'll do that.
Yeah. Now it just seems like there's 10 or 12 songs. Just like, oh yeah, just put them wherever. It doesn't seem like, that first song was like almost like a live show where it would hit you on top of the head. It would suck you in. And
and the cool thing about vinyl was that you had side 2.
Right.
So you had a second lead track as well.
And I always thought
that was really cool.
And it was always a thing too amongst my friends and I that we could tell you what side and where in the sequence the song was. Like, oh, it's side 2, song 3, and it was written by this guy, and you just don't have that anymore because you're just basically point clicking download, and it basically there's no physical aspect of it. The other thing that people forget about too is everyone I know that has a CD collection like mine, probably similar to yours, with vinyl, is our display. We like to show it off.
Yes.
It's part of it. Like we like it when our friends come over and they look at our shelves or our wall with our music and they'll go, oh, wow, I remember that record. And I remember, oh, yeah, you got this? Oh, oh, man, this is so cool.
Yeah, you learned a lot about a person if you didn't know them. If you're visiting with a friend at another friend's house.
Right.
You could really learn, who's this person? What are they all about?
Yeah, like I could be friends with this guy. If he likes this band and that band, I think we got a lot in common. And you bonded over
it's interesting they bring that up. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting that you bring that up because that's something that we really lost in what I call the MP3 era. I always use the example of my buddy who has I think either 3 2-terabyte hard drives or whatever. He's got a bunch of hard drives just jam packed with music, and it's unmanageable. Mm-hmm. That's not a collection, that's a mess.
Right.
And the best you can hope for is to put it on shuffle and pray.
Right.
That something comes up that you like. But you make a great point. Nobody sits around flipping through playlists on a computer or looking at the titles of digital tracks and go, oh wow, you stand around with a glass of craft porter or wine or something and then look at the spines of somebody's record collection or CD collection, and pull them down and go, oh yeah, and then admire the art and stuff, so it's a much more engaging way to collect than sort of amassing computer files.
It also has the ability to take you back, right? So when you're looking at someone's collection or if you're revisiting your own, and let's say you pull out an album that you haven't looked at in a while, you immediately go to that place in time when you were younger. It jogs your memory. You start to remember hanging out in the summer, driving around, listening to this song, or the girl you dated when this song was popular, or whatever. It just has that ability to be a time machine. And I've brought this up before in a previous show. David Lee Roth, who I think is absolutely amazing, if you ever listen to his podcast, it's just man, the guy is just a genius.
Yeah,
he mentions, he talks about listening to music. And when you hear a song that you dig, you hear a song that you like, listen to it over and over and over again. Wear it out, completely overplay it. Because when you hear it 20 years later, you will remember that song and you will remember your time and place in life when that song was popular, when that song came out. Because music does have the ability to act like a time machine that jettisons you to different parts of your memory. So
somebody that we have a mutual follow on Twitter tweeted about Kansas Left Overture the other day.
Yes,
and I was like, oh yeah, Left Overture, So I was having a hard time sleeping, and I fired it up and put it on while I was trying to get to sleep. And just listening to side 1 in particular that kicked off with Carry On Wayward Son, I was just I was transported back to 8th grade. When after school, this guy Brad Collins and I, every day we'd walk back to my house and we'd put the same stack of records on the spindle on my parents' hi-fi. And Kansas Left Overture was one, Pink Floyd Animals, Alan Parsons' I, Robot, Joe Walsh, but seriously, folks. And just listening to the tunes on Left Overture, I was like, I went right back to that place. I could see the couch in our basement and like the black and sort of orange shag carpet and the little pool table and studying algebra. And, it was paradise. That collection of songs took me back to, a time in my life that I would consider to be paradise.
Yeah. And when I look at my son, who does enjoy the physical aspect of music, and his friends and people in that generation, and even older, the 20 somethings that are out there, there's no connection to it. It doesn't have the same meaning. Yes, they may like a song that's on the radio. Well, first of all, I don't consider people who like pop music fans. I consider people who like pop music, they enjoy music. They're not fans.
Yeah, they're music consumers, is what I call them.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's a good way to describe them. But when you hear, the younger generation talk about music, I got my Google playlist or I've got my Amazon playlist or Spotify. And yes, we've got to be honest and say, yes, that's where music is going. Well, it's already there. It's going to continue to go down that road. I think that is really, if people really want to talk about what's wrong with the music business and why the music business is struggling, it's because the lack of connection with music, the lack of physical connection with it. Mm-hmm. It's no longer an experience. It's no longer a day you looked forward to. When you looked at a magazine back in the day and you saw this album comes out on this date, or this band's coming to town on this date, you circled your calendar. You were ready for it. You didn't get a chance to go on YouTube and watch the concert before you went to it.
Download the set list before you go to the show.
Exactly. You were hoping that they would play a song that you wanted them to play, right? You didn't go in the...
Yeah, we always had a bet. What are they going to open with?
Yes.
What are the encores going to be,
So all of that has to do with it, because it's no longer special. It's no longer a moment that you mark out throughout your week that you're going to go get this record at the record store. When I first took my son to a record store, he's like, "Where are we going?" I go, "We're going to a record store." Like, "What do you mean?" Like, a record store? like they just sell music there? I'm like, "Yeah, they just sell music. Like, only music, not like appliances or..." I'm like, "No, they only sell music." Like,
maybe some T-shirts, some posters.
Yeah, music-related items and stuff like that. And he loved it. He walked in like, that was so cool. It's still not the same as when we were younger, but I kind of get upset when I hear my friends talk about their kids and their music tastes. And my son is a little rocker. He's a teenager. He's in high school. He likes rock music. And I like to think that I had a lot to do with that. I still remember...
You did?
Yes. I still remember the day that I picked him up and he started to sing Lady Gaga Poker Face. And he was like 3 years old.
I love it.
He was like 3 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, what are you singing? And he's like, Lady Gaga, Dad. And I'm like, no. No. I mean, Lady Gaga, immensely talented, but no. So then I just started playing my music in the car with him and slowly having him absorb that and get into it. And I talk to my friends whose kids like other forms of music, whether it's rap or country or techno or whatever. And I'm just like, what happened to you, man? Like this was your responsibility as a parent to pass off the passion of rock and roll. And I just,
just an AC/DC onesie isn't going to do it, man.
That's so true. That's so true. Like now people buy the T-shirt, they have no idea, like more than like 2 or 3 songs. Like, give me an AC/DC song that's not off Back in Black and Highway to Hell.
Right. I were talking to some girl, and she said she had on a Metallica shirt. She had on a Metallica shirt. It was like, it's Metallica. Like she thought it was like a clothing line or something like that.
Oh my God. Yeah. I had an experience too. I saw a kid wearing a Motorhead shirt one time. What's the name of a song from Motorhead? And he couldn't do it. So it's almost become like a fashionable thing to wear now, unbeknownst to them, the music that what's on their T-shirt. The band that performed that. But no, it's hard to describe or how to describe what's going on. But people always talk about how they're going to fix the music business, what needs to be done, and I think there needs to be more of a physical connection to it. I hear bands on Twitter or Facebook post messages. Should we print CDs? Will you buy? Absolutely, you should print those CDs. Absolutely. And it doesn't cost a lot to print them either. It doesn't cost a lot to have a sleeve and a CD, 5 to 6,000 of them. It's not a lot of money to do that. Or when you go on a tour, print enough for the tour and then sell them on your site. You're not going to sell them all right away. It's not like it was years ago. But you will sell those CDs eventually. You will get your money back.
Yeah, it's funny to see these days more young bands selling vinyl at their shows than selling CDs.
Yes.
Which makes sense. But I always think it's funny because I think it's probably for a young band a lot cheaper just to get a bunch of CDs made up.
Absolutely. And you don't have to, you can have your special editions on the website that are like, have live songs or demos on it or whatever. But that's just to go to a show. I went to a concert back in April. And I don't want to name the bands, but it was a national act at a small club, and it was a new band out of LA. After the opening band played, I went up to the merch table to go buy their CDs. I always try to support the new bands and their music. If I know a band's coming to town and I know their CD is out or their album's out, I'll wait till the show to buy the record. Because I know it goes directly to them. There's not like a middleman like Amazon or whoever. So I go up to the merch table and I'm like, "Hey, you guys got a CD? Oh, we haven't finished it up yet." And I'm just like thinking to myself, "You're on tour with a national act, and you don't have your CDs ready? I mean, how is that possible?" So I go to the national acts merch table. Oh, they just released a CD like 2 weeks ago. I'm gonna go get it. Hey, you guys got your new CD? No, we haven't gotten the shipment yet. And I'm like, are you kidding me? like, I don't know how many CDs a band sells a night. Could be 10, It could be 50, I don't know. But to not have that at the merch table after someone sees you live with their eyes is just a lost opportunity for that artist or for that band, and I don't understand it.
No, I agree. And, you bring up a good point about bands, just sort of abandoning physical. And one of the issues, I was just sort of doing a little bit of reading up, prior to our conversation. And one of the things that kept coming up is that R&B and hip hop, which are, those are the genres that are really dominant on the pop charts. Those artists have abandoned physical entirely. Cardi B, some of these other top hip hop acts, they don't print CDs at all. They don't press CDs at all. And in fact, artists in those genres would actually like to go away from the concept of the album and just release tracks, which makes sense. If you've got an album full of 15 tracks and you drop it all at once, you're getting a lot less publicity and promotional value than if you released all those tracks individually, like every month or something. So I get that, but I guess their fans just aren't that into CDs or something. I don't know. But those artists are driving the decline of CD much more than other genres. And because R&B and hip hop, are the cash cows in music today, that's having an impact sort of down the list.
That's interesting. That's an interesting fact that I did not know, that that really did control the output of CD manufacturing was. And it makes sense when you think about it. Pop music is always going to be the driver in a lot of things. But when you can't get rock and roll played on the radio, I hear you have, like every major market, it pretty much is the same thing. Most radio stations are all owned by 2 or 3 companies. They all own, they own everything. And then you've got your local independent station. Usually there's 1 or 2 in every market, in every big market. Some markets don't have that at all.
And maybe you're fortunate enough to live in or near a college town, where there's college radio, which is usually pretty good.
Right. I mean, up in Chicago here, we have XRT, which has always been a really great station. I mean, they still play the deep cuts on a record that no one plays anymore. And then we sometimes get the signal from Milwaukee or from just over the border in Wisconsin. It's called Will Rock, 95 Will Rock. And it's maybe Lake County, Illinois, or maybe it's Wisconsin. I'm not sure. But they play a lot more harder edge music. But still, it's an independent station that's allowed to play pretty much what they want. You don't have that anymore. You don't have any rock music. And the rock music that is out there is all classic rock. And not to say that
that's right.
Not to say that classic rock is bad, because it's not. It's great music, but you're not getting anything new. Even those bands that are played on classic rock, whether it's Led Zeppelin / Robert Plant, no one plays Robert Plant's new stuff on the radio. Whether it's Def Leppard, no one plays their new
they'll play
stuff.
the Stones, but it's going to be Brown Sugar.
Right,
you know,
right.
It's the same playlist that I was driving around with in my first car in 1981 or 2 or whatever. It's still Yes, Roundabout, and it's the same songs.
Right.
I remember the classic rock station in town here, WCSX. They're like, and next up, a deep cut from Elton John, and they played Tiny Dancer. I'm like, that's a great song, but it is not a deep cut.
No.
Let's just be clear.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah, they don't play like a deep cut by Led Zeppelin. They don't play like Night Flight or Out on the Tiles or anything like that.
Right.
You're not going to hear that stuff, and that's all because it's all corporate and packaged, and I don't know. I mean, you look at the draws for live shows, right? You look at all those concerts that are out there, whether it's Metallica or Guns N' Roses. I mean, they're all huge draws. They're all huge moneymakers. I don't know why it doesn't translate into more airplay for newer music or just a straight rock station. I don't get it.
I think they're slicing and dicing this stuff by demographic. Successful tours like AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, the Eagles are seen as middle-aged music. And it's not, that genre isn't, sort of promoted as popular music on the mainstream charts. That's what's so interesting to me about Greta Van Fleet. Talk about live performance, listening to their recorded stuff is a completely different experience than seeing them live and hearing them live, as I'm sure you can attest.
Yes.
I mean, those guys have that spirit. I don't know, what deal with the devil at the crossroads or whatever they made, but they've got that. They've got that energy, that spirit. And it's interesting that I've seen them a couple times. Us old guys are maybe hanging back more by the bar, and the younger folks are up near pressing towards the front. But you got a really wide range of people.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Who are attending those shows, and and Jack White is a similar type of phenomenon with his fan base. In some ways, there's like a self-fulfilling prophecy about this. It's like, well, the kids don't like the rock and roll, so let's not promote it to the kids. When clearly they do. I mean, rock and roll. There's always going to be an appeal to guitar, bass, drums, and rock shouting. There's just the energy is amazing. And I listened to your discussion about Chris Cornell and talking about grunge a little bit, and like grunge was really just rock and roll, right? With a little more angst, right? A little more, introspection and, a little less good time celebration. It's all there. Something you said earlier made me think about, you remember Neil Young, like when CD first came out, when digital became a thing?
Yes.
Remember how anti-digital he was?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I remember, like, I'm looking at, got a copy of Nevermind sitting here on my desk, and it has the AAD, right? So that was like a thing in the early days of CD. It was like AAD or DDD, or DDD it was recorded in digital, mixed in digital, mastered in digital, and that was supposed to be the best thing, right? It was digital, all digital. And so even though Neil embraced that, he recorded digitally, even though he was railing against, digital music. But I always think about that, and I wonder, does something happen when you move away from that, just that nice, pleasant, analog sort of waveform in the sound, and you go back, go to that more like jagged step form of the sound. And I wonder if I always wonder if there's something in the shift of format from analog to digital that is a part of this mix that has really changed music so much. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah, I do. I think, obviously I have my vinyl collection. I always prefer the CD because I love the cleaner sound. Not to say that, I don't like the intimacy of vinyl, because I do. You do get more of an intimate sound on it.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, then you had more of a, with the cassette, kind of had that era where it was kind of, cassettes was kind of like the necessary evil back in the day, because vinyl was going
more
away.
Of a convenience.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But CD, people talk about, streaming music digitally, whether it's, on Spotify or wherever they get their music. CD is still digital, and CD still sounds great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I think people forget that this is a digital format we're talking about here.
Right. And
Compact
to me,
disc, digital audio.
To me, it sounds better. If you put a CD on a stereo versus streaming on whatever, if you can connect it through Bluetooth on your stereo, the CD will always sound better. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a compression thing or what. I have no idea. But it definitely sounds way better. And you still
and there's a lot of discussion about that, and has been since CD was introduced back in like '82. I think it originally debuted. And you've heard talk of the loudness wars, right? That and you mentioned compression, so that is a phenomenon with CDs, and that's why whenever people say, "Oh, vinyl always sounds better than digital than CDs," I'm like, that's not a fair comparison.
Right?
You're really not. That's an apples and oranges type thing. You can put on. I guarantee if you went home and started Led Zeppelin 4 at the beginning of the record and the beginning of the CD, and just flip back and forth from the input, the CD is just going to be louder. It just is. Mm-hmm. That's the way they were mastered was different. The whole process of bringing the music onto the the fixed disc is different. So and so that's why the whole notion of what's better or worse isn't really even relevant. It's what's most appealing to your ears. Let's talk about this friend of mine his goal is to acquire the best sounding copy of every Frank Sinatra recording. He does his research. He's like, sometimes it's a CD, sometimes it's a vinyl record, sometimes it's a high res FLAC file. It's just a matter of what sounds best. That's where I feel like, in terms of format, and I look at my daughter who's 7 now, and I started collecting vinyl again when she was a baby. So she's grown up with big black round things playing music and little, smaller silver things playing music, and mama's phone, playing music. And she doesn't care. It could be a hamster on a wheel producing the sound. She just wants something that sounds good to her, and I hope that we're sort of moving in that direction as a community of music lovers. And the point that I make a lot is the only people who win in a format war are the rights holders, the people who control the means of production and then who hold the rights to the most coveted content. So it's in the record company's best interest to kill off vinyl and sell you CDs. Now they can release the same back catalog and cash the checks all over it. There's really no need to kill off a format, right?
Right.
Everybody has their own preference. Maybe we're moving a little bit in that direction. Some formats just frankly didn't make it. I was thinking about things like mini disc and digital compact cassette, that came out in the 90s.
Yeah,
and,
I remember
stuff
those.
That it's like Sony Beta tapes or whatever. Some of that stuff just never reached critical mass where you could reasonably keep manufacturing it. But
yeah.
CDs, records, there's a place for all this stuff. I think even cassettes. They have cassette store day now. Lots of these obscure bands that I've never heard of have cassette only releases,
which I don't get. And I know, I don't get that. I understand the vinyl because of it's kind of like vinyl. I look at it as kind of like memorabilia. Like a band puts out a vinyl. Most people maybe never play it. They keep it in the plastic and they put it on their shelf in their record collection, their vinyl collection. And it's a sense of, it's a product, right? And the CD is the digital format. The CD, there are still cars with CD players in it. There's still people that have CD players in their home, much more than a record player. So that's their, maybe their preferred way of playing it. Digital, I get, the young kid with his phone and whatnot. But cassette, where do you play that? and maybe it is like the memorabilia. Okay, so maybe if we go down that road and connect it that way, okay, I get it. It's a memorabilia piece of that artist or band. There's a podcast that with AC/DC that I've done, and in that discussion is how we compare AC/DC to Kiss in terms of memorabilia. And Kiss, of course, just flooded the market with everything from the Kiss phonograph to the Kiss garbage can to whatever. Whereas AC/DC didn't have a lot of memorabilia. So I can understand someone who likes a band like AC/DC who's very passionate buying their vinyl re-releases. The different colored vinyl, like the white vinyl or the red vinyl or whatever. I get it. And that's a great way to pull in revenue for a band too as well. But, the cassette, I guess if you quantify it that way, I guess it is memorabilia. But I just I don't know. I start to get the shakes whenever I see a cassette, because it's like, now
I got to go buy an 83 Dodge Omni so I can play this thing,
But I just remember all the frustration with a cassette. Remember when the tape would get all crazy, or it would come out and it would wrap around the...
You got the pencil out on the cap stand there, and you're trying to rewrap it,
Right. And then you had these cassette holder things, these where you put them in there. And what would always frustrate me about the cassettes is that when you put them in these drawer things or whatever, you couldn't display them. They were in a box. You had to open them up. So that's why I always loved CD or vinyl, because I could put it on my shelf. I could put it. Cassettes, I don't know. I had a whole bunch of cassettes.
I remember when I moved once, I had an Explorer it had a CD player, but it also had a cassette. It was 2000, so I don't even know why it still had it. But so in moving, I found this big box of cassettes. A lot of pre-record stuff, a lot of commercially purchased stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to put this box in the car. I'm going to drive around and listen to see what I got here. All this stuff was so dropped out and I would just I'd listen for 10 minutes, flip it out the window. That's trash.
Yeah. Now that you've fallen in love with the digital sound, hearing a cassette, it's this is going back to VHS from DVD or Blu-ray. It just doesn't hold up. And so I guess if it's that avenue that they're trying to create a sense of or a piece of memorabilia for whomever, I get it. I understand that.
Yeah. But I think the whole mixtape thing, I've got a lot of nostalgia for the mixtape and the Walkman kind of thing from the 80s.
The original file sharing was the mixtape. If you had a couple records that your friends did and they had a couple records that you didn't, you'd kind of record it for them. And the only difference is that if I like the record, if my friends like the record, I would go out and buy the physical copy. I would go out and buy the cassette. I'm like, oh wow, this Megadeth record or this Van Halen album is great. I would go buy it. Whereas I think now with file sharing and everything, once you have it, you don't have the urge or motivation to go buy the physical copy.
Right, that's true. Yeah, and I used to with the blank cassettes, just the odd pairings that you'd end up with. I remember I had Sgt. Pepper on side A and Hotel California on side B. It's okay, cool. But it's just hey, just throw something on there. It was never I never really thought about it that much, but it was always interesting to see what two records.
You only thought about it when you were making a mixtape for a chick, right?
Right.
Exactly. You were trying to convey your feelings through the music. So that's when it was important.
Yeah.
The other
for sure.
Yeah, the other thing that not talked about with streaming music in the digital format is how it pigeonholes your taste in music. So if you're on Google Play and you're streaming through Google, or if you're streaming through Spotify and you've got a list of artists that you like, you're not going to hear anything different. You're only going to hear what is like this band or like this artist. You're not going to have the freedom to explore other artists that may sound really cool. Like if you're like streaming Metallica, Mastodon, Megadeth, Slayer, you're not going to hear anything different. And maybe you don't want to hear anything different.
Right. Maybe you don't.
Maybe you don't. Maybe that's cool to you. I always like to hear. I love different stuff. I love everything from Bob Seger to Metallica to Led Zeppelin.
Mm-hmm.
To the Beatles. I like it all. I mean, like if it's good, I want to hear it and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And with streaming,
and then there was Pandora, right? I was always like intrigued by the promise of a Pandora station turning me on to something that I didn't know before, but it never really works out that way. It always, like my sister, I was talking to my sister last night. She's like, it always ends up playing the Beatles no matter what I do. And I'm like, you're right.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes recently was from a guy named Ben Cesario, who writes in the New York Times, and he was talking about tech. And he said, to be honest, my preferred way to listen to music is on CD, as unfashionable as that might be. You push a button, the music plays, and then it's over. No ads, no privacy terrors, no algorithms.
That's so true. That is
well
a perfect.
said.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing too is your lack of exposure. So like, let's say you're an artist or you're a fan and you have the Beatles, the Stones, and you have Zeppelin on your Pandora or Spotify. Let's say there's some new bands out there that you probably like. If you like those three bands, you're never going to hear them.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to hear them because the algorithm is going to put you farther away from that. And then it's so much harder for a newer band with new music to get discovered because of that.
Yeah. You've got to push your way into the tech, into the sort of the A&R system and then into the tech part of that whole thing. Somehow you've got to push your way in. That has got to be more difficult to try and figure out than, trying to get signed by a label,
Right.
Well, that's another thing. You're talking about the depersonalization of music. You had, really interesting discussion with, I forget her name, when you guys were talking about The Dirt on a recent episode. And she was talking about having an older friend who got her into Motley Crue. And that friend, she kept getting new ideas of things to listen to from that friend. Or she'd go to the record store and ask, I am into this. What else did you? So that's real personal, right? I mean, you're interacting with other human beings, sharing tastes, and then going out and experimenting with this new information that you've received from an actual person and putting it to the test and then sharing that with somebody else coming along. And this sort of algorithm-based discovery thing, we're losing more human contact, right? Yes. More bots are instructing us and guiding us and telling us what to do instead of other people. And I think that I'm not comfortable with that. Let's put it that way.
Well, it really is the new way, right? I mean, technology has the ability to connect you with more people, but also isolate you at the same time. It's very tricky how that whole thing works. Like, you think of Facebook, not to get off on a rant here or anything like that, but I'm in my mid-40s. So we had our 15-year, what was it? Hold on a second. Yes, we had our 15-year high school reunion, or 20-year high school reunion. And everybody...
You didn't go to math college, I guess.
Well, I'm just trying. Yeah. Good one. Very funny. But I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. So we had a school. I don't know if it was a 15-year or 20-year or whatever, but we had an event where everyone got together, and this is pre-Facebook, and everybody showed up because you wanted to see old friends. You wanted to know what was going on with everybody. Everyone had that conversation. Hey man, what have you been up to? Hey, what have you been doing? What's going on? Now, when we just had our 25th year reunion, barely anybody went because everybody knows what's going on with everybody. So those discussions never take place. Those that hey, I want to go and talk to this guy. I haven't talked to him in 10 plus years. You see his Facebook feed, you already know what's going on. And then when people when people post the annoying shit that everybody, reads and everything like that. Oh God, I don't want to go talk to that guy. Like, oh, he's just annoying, So it takes.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm not on Facebook, because I just don't want to be found.
Well, you don't want to be
Most
found.
Most of those people I didn't like when I was in high school. I'm pretty sure I'm still not going to like them.
But it just goes like, yes, it's connecting you to everybody from your past that's on Facebook. You can connect with old girlfriends, old friends, old coworkers, everything. It's so awesome. Wow, you can connect with everybody. But then, think about how social you are as a result of that. Now, for instance, my circle of friends has gotten a lot smaller as I've got older. I think that's natural in most cases. But I think it just becomes that you become more isolated. You lack the motivation to be social or go to social events, because that aspect of seeing everybody and knowing everybody's business already stops you from participating in that. And I think it also goes with the same with music, right? So you are connected to all the artists that you like on Twitter, on Facebook, on Spotify, on Pandora. Wow, I used to like these guys. I'm like this guy. And then you lack the motivation to hear anything new. Most of us who are passionate about music love hearing new music. However, when that algorithm or that digital side or that digital aspect almost prohibits you from searching for it or knowing of it, everybody loses. You lose as a music fan. The artist loses because that band can't reach you like it used to be able to. And then you add in the live show where you can go on YouTube and you could pretty much see how they're performing. Oh, this guy, they don't really sound good anymore. I don't want to go spend the money and go check them out. So
look at him. He looks old.
Yeah, that's the other thing too.
He's not hot anymore.
Yeah, it's like who the hell are we to? Oh, he doesn't sound like he used to sound. Oh my God, he's just out of shape. Most of us, as we've gotten older, have gotten out of shape, have lost some hair, don't look like we used to, don't sound like we used to. So who are we to sit there, be negative or comment negatively on Robert Plant or whomever? No one is going to sound, when they're pushing 70, no one's going to sound like they did when they were 22. It's just impossible. It's just not going to happen. And most of us who are commenting, or those that are commenting, are sitting behind a computer screen, resting their beer on their gut, and passing judgment. It just annoys the piss out of me when I read that stuff. It's like, no, man. If you go to a show with the same expectation that you had when you saw them 20 years ago, you shouldn't go. You shouldn't go. Don't go. If
Yeah, and it's a really great point. And so back in the aughts, as I like to call them, great band from your nape of the neck, Wilco.
Yes.
Right? Just embodied what we're talking about, the antithesis of what we're talking about, because those guys just tour. They still do. I mean, I'm sort of out of it, but for, a good, better part of a decade, I didn't, some of my buddies were on the road, at least through the Midwest with Wilco. Would follow them around. They go to Kalamazoo, they go to Louisville, they go to Cincinnati, they go to Chicago. Do the residency at the Riviera or whatever. You could meet those guys. If you went to a show, Jon Stewart might be at the bar before the set. Tweety does house concerts and stuff like that, where you can actually meet these guys and get to know them. And I mean, there's a deep connection that they've forged between themselves and their audience that you can't. And social media has been a big part of that. Via Chicago, their message board and stuff like that was a great way for people to connect. I made a lot of great friendships with other fans, and then you found out about other bands would open for Wilco and other, people you'd stand in line with who were like, "Yeah, you're into this, check this out." So it was just it's almost like a deadhead kind of thing in a way.
Yeah.
Where, you'd see familiar faces at the shows and learn about new artists and that type of thing. And everybody was, sort of on the same page, different angles at it and stuff like that. And I that really appealed to me, at that time when the iPod and iTunes and MP3, computer-based, file-based music was, sort of taking over. It was, my first final purchase. I bought a copy of a Wilco record at one of their shows. I was like, oh, they're selling vinyl. Cool. So I think artists really crave that too. I mean, you always hear about artists who want to go get back out on the road, get, in front of the fans and hear the applause and that type of thing. So there's a real human element to all of this. You just read frequency of a guitar, certain woods that they choose to make a guitar. The digitizing of everything it just seems less human to me.
Right.
And we lose those connections. But that kind of gets back to like my multi-format type thing. I mean, you and I are connected through social media, through Twitter. I would never have known you or got the chance to, hear your conversations with other like-minded folks if it wasn't for social media. So, and algorithms have sort of turned me on to music that I wouldn't have heard about otherwise. But I think this absolutist sort of mentality about format is really where we slip out of balance, like it's got to be all this or it's got to be all that. And then again, I go back to, the only one who benefits from that is the man,
Yeah, that's true.
So I think, there's an opportunity for all this stuff to coexist. And that's what I like about, there's like some 1,800 independent music sellers still in the United States. That's great, man. Like I go to my local record store once a week, and sometimes I'm not even in the market to buy. I just go to talk to the people who work there, talk about new releases, what's coming out. Then I can go home and I can sample some stuff. I have I guess they call it Napster now, a Rhapsody account, and I can go home and I can sample that. Like, okay, I wanted to hear the Stray Cats record. How does this sound? Do I want to? I mean, for me, it's like, do I want to invest shelf space? Frankly, I have a limited amount.
Yes.
Small house with now 2 little kids. I like that. If there's a really expensive record that I've been looking for, but I don't really know that much about it, well, I can listen to it, and decide whether this is something that I want to invest in for my collection. So, I think there's symbiosis across all these formats, and I hope that CD hangs in there. I really do, because I think the CD format. I made a mixed CD for the woman who eventually became my wife before she went on a trip to New York with her friends. I wanted to show her how thoughtful and cool I was by making this thing for her, and showing her like, this is all the cool music I'm down with. So that whole notion of sharing music like a mixtape. So I hope that we stick around with that. And there's some 250 billion CDs that have been sold over the years. So there's a lot of great music, that's out there on the cheap. Yeah. I mean, you can buy, I was at the record store the other day and they're like, there's a bunch of free stuff up by the front door. And I was like, wow, cool. There's like tons of compilations with bands I'd never heard of, but mixed in with some bands I'd sort of heard of. I'm like, oh, great. I grabbed like 30 of them. I'm like, maybe hopefully I can discover some new artists. And, and they had like the mystery box, buy it for $1 and there's 40 CDs in there. I'm like, they're giving this stuff away, Jay.
Well,
that sounds great, man.
Well, I think we're going to end it there. We're going to have to end it there. But no, I want to pick up this conversation again. I think we could keep talking about different ways and different avenues. But we'll end it with the mystery box, the experience of picking up free music like that. I think that's great. Once again, I thank you for doing this. I really do appreciate it. It's great having you on, and I look forward to having you on again.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Chris, I really do appreciate it.
I love the podcast. I mean, you've had a lot of great guests and covering some really compelling topics.
Well, I want to do more stuff like this, though. Instead of like focusing on a specific artist or band, I love having discussions like this, and because I think it's important for music fans and music lovers to kind of hear different opinions and different points of view, maybe things they're not thinking of, and how they can help keep rock music alive and functioning. because I don't think it's dying. I don't think it's dying like people say it is, but I think it's definitely on life support. So, but hey, again,
I'd love to pick up this conversation again, and we talked about doing a sequencing conversation. That would be a fun conversation to have right there.
Let's do that. Let's do something about sequencing. Yeah. Let's message each other. Let's pick a time and date, and let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
That sounds wonderful.
All right, Chris. Thank you again very much. We'll talk again soon. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Once again, this is The Hook, the Ultimate Rock Community Podcast, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Thank you.